Mr. Norton, Mrs. Vogelcheck, Mr. Platypus, Mrs. Shembla. You've been summoned by the courts to stand trial for the double murder and cannibalism of Paul and Phil. Your assigned employee needs to be let go for insubordination. Your drug-riddled son choked on his vomit and is now stuck in a coma. Your wife is pregnant with your neighbor's baby.
And it looks like tomorrow will be just as sunny and perfect as today. Thank you for tuning in to GNN. I'm your good newsman, Bob Trin, reminding you to save your troubling info for your local bad newsman. Although, I wouldn't blame you for wanting a break from that sad old drone, huh?
Hello everyone, we are from Group 1 and now we're gonna present about negative message. Our group consists of 4 members. The first one is Rhea Natania, Rafa Nithalaida, Cika, Nandita, and the last one, Artanti, Shira, Diva, Ananta. In this occasion, we're gonna learn about strategies of business communicators in conveying negative news, distinguish between the direct and indirect strategies in conveying unfavorable news, explain the component of negative message, apply effective techniques for revision typical requests or claim, as well as for presenting bad news to customer in print or online. And the last one, describe and apply effective techniques for delivering bad news with organizations.
The truth is that everyone occasionally must deliver bad news in business because bad news disappoints, irritates, and sometimes angers the receiver. Such message must be written carefully. The bad things associated with disappointing news can generally be reduced if the receiver knows the reason for the rejection, feels the news was revealed sensitively, and believes the matter was treated seriously and fairly. In this chapter, you will learn when to use the direct strategy and when to use the indirect strategy to deliver bad news. You will study the goals of business communicators in working with unfavorable news and learn techniques for achieving those goals. And I'm going to explain about the articulating goals in communicating negative news. Now I'm going to explain about the articulating goals in communicating negative news. Delivering negative news is not the happiest communication task you may have, but it can be gratifying if you do it effectively. As a business communicator, working with bad news, you will have many goals, and the most important always are summarized in this picture. And the goals in outline in figure in this picture are ambitious, and we are not always successful in achieving them all. However, many senders have found the strategies and techniques you are about to learn helpful in conveying disappointing news sensitively and safely. With experience, you will be able to vary the strategies and adapt them to your organization-specific communication tasks. Applying the 3x3 writing process. Thinking through the entire writing process is especially important when writing bad news message because the way bad news is revealed often determines how it is accepted. You have probably heard people say, I didn't mind the news so much, but I resented the way I was told. Certain techniques can help you deliver bad news sensitively, beginning with the familiar 3x3 writing process. Analyzing, anticipating, and adapting. When you have bad news to convey, one of your first consideration is how that message will affect its receiver. If the disappointment will be mild, announce it directly. For example, a small rate increase in a newspaper or web subscription can be announced directly. If the bad news is serious or personal, consider techniques to reduce the pain. In the intuitive situation, a bad news message will have prepared the TurboTax user, give reason for omitting customer reforms and upselling to more expensive products, possibly offered alternatives, and show the goodwill of the receiver. Choose words that show that you have to respect the reader and as a responsible, valuable person. Select the best channel to deliver the bad news. In many negative situations, you will be dealing with a customer. If your goal is retaining the goodwill of a customer, a letter on a company's stationery will be more impressive than an email. Researching, organizing, and drafting. In phase 2, you will gather information and brainstorm for ideas. Jot down all the reasons you have that explain the bad news. If 4 or 5 reasons prompt your negative decision, concentrate on the strongest and the safest one. Avoid presenting any weak reasons. Readers may seize on them to reject the entire message. Include an example explanation of the negative situation and avoiding fixing blame. In composing any negative news, conduct research if necessary to help you explain what went wrong and why decision or action is necessary. Editing, proofreading, and evaluating. In phase 3, you will read over your message carefully to ensure that it says what you intend. Check your wording to be sure you are consistent without being gruff. If you find that you have overused certain words, use a thesaurus to find synonyms. Read your sentences to see if they sound like conversation and flow smoothly. This is the time to edit and improve coherence and tone. In a bad news message, the tone is especially important. Readers are more likely to accept negative message if the tone is friendly and respectful. Even when the bad news can be changed, its effect can be reduced somewhat by the way it is presented. In the last phase of writing process, proofread to make sure your verb agree with their subjects, your sentences are properly punctuated, and all words are spelled correctly. Pay attention to common mistakes. If your word processing application, check grammar. Be sure to investigate those suddenly underscores, and finally, evaluate your message.
Next, we're going to talk about analyzing negative news strategies. Unfavorable news in business doesn't always fall into neat categories. You have at your disposal two basic strategies for delivering negative news: direct and indirect. So, when to use the direct strategy? The first one is when the bad news is not damaging. The second one is when the receiver may overlook the bad news. The third one is when the organizations or receiver prefers directness. And the last one is when the firmness is necessary. Next, we're going to talk about when to use the indirect strategy. The first one is when the bad news is personally upsetting. The second one is when the bad news will provoke a hostile reaction. The third one is when the bad news threatens the customer's relationships. And the last one is when the bad news is unexpected. So, how to keeping the indirect strategy ethical? You may worry that the indirect organizational strategy is unethical or manipulative because the writer deliberately delays the main idea. Now, consider the alternative. Breaking bad news bluntly can cause pain and hard feelings. By delaying bad news, you soften the blow somewhat, as well as ensure that your reasoning will be read while the receiver is still receptive.
Next is composing effective negative message. Opening indirect message with a buffer. There are 6 points. There are best news, compliment, appreciation, agreement, fact, and understanding. Apologizing. An apology is defined as an admission of blameworthiness and regret for an undesirable event. Consider this poor and improve apologize. There are 2 types of apologize. There are poor and improve. As you guys can see on the screen, there are the example of poor and improve apology. Showing empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and enter into the feelings of another. Here are examples of ways to express empathy in written message. There are in writing to an unhappy customer, in laying off employees, in responding to a complaint, and in showing genuine feelings. You can see on the screen there are the example. Presenting the reasons. Providing an explanation reduces feelings of ill will and improves the chance that readers will accept the bad news. Without sound reasons for denying a request, refusing a claim, or revealing other bad news, a message will fail, no matter how cleverly it is organized or written. So there are 5 points. The first one is explaining clearly, citing reader or other benefits if plausible, explaining company policy, choosing positive words, and showing fairness and serious intent. Cushioning the bad news. Although you can't prevent the disappointment that bad news brings, you can reduce the pain somewhat by breaking the news sensitively. Be especially considerate when the reader will suffer personally from the bad news. A number of thoughtful techniques can cushion the blow. Here the example. The first one is positioning the bad news strategically and using the passive voice, highlighting the positive, implying the refusal and suggesting a compromise or an alternative. Closing pleasantly. After explaining the bad news sensitively, close the message with a pleasant statement that promotes goodwill. The closing should be personalized and may include a forward look, an alternative, good wishes, freebies, resale information, or a sales promotion. Resale refers to mentioning a product or service, preferably to reinforce the customer's choice. For example, you choose our best-selling model.
When you must decline an invitation to speak or make a presentation, you generally try to provide a response that says more than "I can" or "I don't want to." Unless the reasons are confidential or business secrets, try to explain them. Because response to invitations are often take personality. Make a special effort to solve the refusal. As you can see in the PPT, this is the example of declining an invitation. Dealing with disappointed customer in print and online. All business offering products or service must sometimes deal with troublesome situations that cause unhappiness to customers. The example, merchandise is not delivered on time, a product fails to perform as expected, or service is deficient. Wherever possible, these problems should be dealt with immediately and personally. Most business professionals strive to control the damage and resolve such problems in the following manner. Managing negative news online. Today's impatient, hyper-connect consumers eagerly embrace the idea of delivering their complaints to social networking sites rather than calling customer service departments. Complaint sites are gaining momentum for many reasons. Consumers may receive faster response to tweets than to customer service calls.
Managing bad news within an organization, delivering bad news in person. Whether you are an employee or a supervisor, you may have the unhappy responsibility of delivering bad news. If you know that the news will upset the receiver, the reason for strategy is most effective. When the bad news involves one person or small group nearby, you should generally deliver the news in person. Here are the pointers on how to do so tactfully, professionally, and safely. Gather all the information, prepare and rehearse, explain past, present, and future. Consider taking a partner, thinking about timing, and be patient with the reaction.